Good morning, everyone. So we're now back and we're going to continue on with the next session for the conference today. Now we have a very special session where we're going to have now a panel of speakers that are going to join us on stage. The commonalities, they're all from the real estate developer perspective and looking at mass timber innovation and their experiences with the technology and their perspective on it. And we're going to have coming on stage Leith Moore, who is the principal and founder of Our House, Eli Miller, the VP of Project Management at Hallmark, and Alexandra Kazam, director at Hines. And the moderator will be Hannes Blas, the president of Rotoblast USA. We're glad to have you all here, and if you could please come to the stage. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Jacob. I'm happy to be up here with such a distinguished panel, Leith, Alex, and Eli. We are gonna start here with a little primer for the audience to give the panelists the opportunity to introduce themselves and to show off for a couple of minutes each what they work on and to have a few visuals. So we start here with Leith.
Well, hi, I'm going to stand because I've been riding my bike for too long. So I'm Leith. I'm co-founder of Our House. I'm the only one on the panel who's not a developer. I am what we call a reform developer. I am trying to find my way to heaven after being, a paver of villages and creator of destruction for so many years as a developer. I've been in the business 40-some years. I won't quantify it too much. The slides that I brought, you're going to have given to you on their website, so I'm going to just leave it at the title page and talk for a minute or two and then sit down. So all Our House has done is taken a vision that I've been trying to push since I was working for a number of very large developers, and that is to build small. And I always ask this question. When I taught at Waterloo, I used to ask this question, what is planning? Are there any planners in the room? Urban planners? You should know. So what is planning?
Politics.
Politics.
Still your mind, sorry.
No, it's fair. I've told that one too many times. But the other thing now that I'm a fabricator and builder, I produce products as opposed to buying land. So I supply solutions to nonprofit groups, individual homeowners, institutional investors. We do a lot of rental with funds. It's the big thing we're working on now. And we do everything from laneway suites, backyard housing, ADUs, up to 12-story mass timber buildings. And they're all useful to different parts of the housing solution. At the very small end, we can create a lot of housing. I'm doing some for nonprofit groups. We're adding ADUs to their, it's the most cost-effective housing they use to create housing quickly. So again, I'm like a product guy and trying to build small. So I always ask how many folks have read E.F. Schumacher's Small is Beautiful? One. Sort of,
I put it on my list after Thursday night.
Thank you. It's a good, even if you, I read it in 77, I think it was published in 75, and it's always stayed with me. And the subtitle to the book is Economics as if People Matter. So I've been in the business a long time, and one thing I know, it's not really designed to produce something that you want. It's designed to be something that we're used to building and we think you want, or you used to want, and the banks and the buildings and everything's aligned to create that known entity. So what I've been trying to do, and I don't recommend it to anybody, is when I turned 60, I decided I would change the world and change the way building gets done and go to a productized route. Hardest thing I've ever done. I'm having a ball, but it's my dogs are little. So, but what we do now is I wouldn't even call it a kit of parts. You'll hear that phrase around from people. We've started with a product. So how do we most cost effectively build small buildings in urban environments? And the answer is through 4 key steps. 1, try and build as of right and work with municipalities to improve their policies. Check. We've done a really good job here in Toronto. Toronto's done a good job with their entitlements on smaller. Could be better, but they've done the best so far. And the province, frankly, now with their policies and the federal government funding, is trying to get everybody to do more as of right. So slowly that is getting solved. Second, it's the idea that you design something that can be reused. The one-of products, one-of buildings are the most expensive and complicated, and the trades steal money from you hand over fist building it because they put in all kinds of contingency. They don't know how it'll go. 50% of all labor budgets on a project are contingencies. It's called walking around time. What if there's a conflict between a structural member and a mechanical duct? Tools down, go home till they figure it out. Time riding up and down on hoists. Carpenters delayed, drywallers delayed. So because every building has to be figured out on the site, it takes longer and there's a lot of delay. So they build a lot of contingency in. So what we do is by building in BIM 3D, clash detection up front, and a modular structural approach. It's not 3D modular. We do it's pejoratively called 2D modular. We tilt up panels that are pre-clad and bring in pre-assembled walls, and so we build quickly. So we use that as a way to get costs and time compressed. So we are faster to get to a permit, faster to get a permit out, because it's something the city generally has seen before. So then the last thing we kind of add into that is 2 things. One, we're controlling a little more of our own fabrication by investing in dimensional lumber people. Element 5 is a prime sponsor here. Great, we got the CLT. But most buildings we can use dimensional lumber for interior walls, and sometimes on the exteriors we don't need CLT or mass timber. So mass timber, yes, great, carbon, all the good benefits, but not necessarily everything in mass timber. So dimensional lumber has got a role. Hard to find panel guys because all the low-rise builders now consume that market. They're tapped out. So we've invested in our own little company. We're scaling it to be able to do our own panels. And then the last thing is we contract differently. We are an IPD CCDC 1330 with our trades. So it means that our consultants and our trades are with us as we design the product package. And then they're involved secondarily to parametrically adapt what we have as a modular system to the client's program. So my 2D floor plans as modules are, we've DFMA, somebody's probably mentioned it in this conference somewhere. So we know the best width, the most efficient width and depth, and we combine those modules, and then we combine them in a way on the site that we can adapt to the program. And if our product doesn't adapt to your program, we recommend you go see a developer and get a one-off build. But if we can make yours work, we can deliver faster and more cost-effectively. My cost includes all of the structural, electrical, mechanical, and architectural, and that structural system is baked, and then we parametrically adapt it. We can clad it in any way we wish. That's just a budgetary consideration. Make it look like Paris or not. So that's what we do. And we're working with private individuals and funds and a lot of institutional work. Because we combine everything on a turnkey basis, we're currently quite popular in the nonprofit community because we're a one-stop shop. My next phase of endeavor is to try and convince municipalities to stop going out and designing a building getting it entitled with an architect and consultants, and then tendering it, and then building it, because they're getting killed on their costs, and it's the most inefficient way to do something like that. So they should be bringing in people early on a design build. Tell me your program, I'll give you a solution, and we'll design to a budget that you can afford. That is not the way most risk management departments work, and so it's a bit of a barrier to actually lowering costs for nonprofit housing. That slowly is coming around. Toronto's, again, leading the way. They've done a math. They create a proposal call from which they select for a 7-year period 3 or 4 builders who can do panelized or modular housing, and now they have pre-qualified them, and it shortens the period on which they can deliver a project to pick a building partner to move forward.
Leith, you got to leave us something to talk about for the rest of the hour. You're covering it all.
No more questions for you, Leith.
Being 65 years old is that you think you know everything. So
When did that happen? I haven't seen you in so long.
So I am done now, though, and I made it through without swearing tonight or this afternoon. So
There's still
it's
time.
an accomplishment. Yeah, during the question period, I may flip one out there just for fun. Thanks.
All right, thanks, Leith. Next up, we have Eli here.
I will try to be a little bit quicker than Leith. Okay, I work for Hallmark. We are an impact design-led real estate development and asset management company. We've come from very humble beginnings. Our founder, Murphy Hall, was a Polish immigrant who started off as a plasterer, and through his experience plastering homes, he started to build homes and buy and sever and develop land, ultimately culminating prior to his death in 2008 with the development of the Hallmark Center at Yonge and Shepherd Avenue. Extremely large, mixed-use master plan community. At the time of his passing, Jeff Hall, his grandson, took over the company and pivoted the strategy from more of an urban developer to, suburban real estate developer where you buy land and zone it, entitle it, bring in a condo builder, to a more urban-centric focus, predominantly around the areas where Murphy and Helen, his wife, lived when they immigrated to Canada. So if you look at sort of our portfolio, it's very concentrated around, I say hyper-focused in some very strategic areas within the city of Toronto. And that allows us to really understand the communities with which we are operating and building it. So we talk about design-led development. We believe in the power of places and the importance of building these places where people come and congregate. And I've worked for different institutional, private, and public organizations. And what I really appreciate about Hallmark is that we really understand those areas to such a degree. We know who's moving in, the types of residents, the types of businesses. So it's more than just building a building. It's about building a community and activating it with our tenants, with our partners, and ensuring that we're having a strong city building experience. So we could just jump to the next slide. We'll talk a little bit about a couple of projects that we've built on. I guess we're done. Okay, see you. Great work. Nice being here with everyone. Okay, so we were the first developer to submit for and achieve a building permit under the revised 2015 building code, which permitted mass timber up to 6 stories. So 80 Atlantic has won numerous awards. We were the first to achieve occupancy in addition to permit. We received the Governor General's Award for Architecture last year, more than I can speak to. But this was an incredible experience, and I think hearing Craig speak earlier, there's a value in investing in architecture. And this was a bit of a case study in that our architect, BDP Quadrangle, I saw Wayne here earlier, I don't know if he's still here, was one of our project architects on it, but Richard Witt really sort of drove us to this solution of looking at mass timber. We loved the built form, and we were willing to commit to investing and committing more costs from a traditional building because we felt that the benefit would be there, and through the rental rates that we achieved, but also through the attendance that we were attracting. So the next building that we worked on was 12 Ossington, small hybrid building at the base of Ossington and Queen, 16,000 square feet, steel structure, NLT, inlay floor panels. When we talk about mass timber, like there's a wide array of product offerings, and not everything can be built in, blue lamp structure. So we felt strongly that we wanted a mass timber element, but we did not feel blue lamp was the right structural solution here. So we went a hybrid solution, which was NLT inlay panels with structural steel superstructure. So just a different approach. Still checks a lot of the boxes from an ESG perspective, but we believe there's not a one size fits all in these projects.
All right, thanks, Eli. Alex, you work with Heinz.
Yeah, so I'm Alex Kazam. I work at Heinz Canada. And for those of you who don't know, Heinz was established in 1957 by Gerald Heinz. He was similar to, what was his name? Murphy Hall. He was actually a civil structural engineer by trade. And until he passed just a couple of years ago, anytime Mr. Heinz visited an office building, he liked to go see the mechanical penthouse first. He wanted the floors to be so clean that you could basically drink soup off them, which was an interesting thing. Anyway, Heinz has expanded. It started in Houston in 1957. It's expanded to 30 countries and almost 300 cities around the world, Canada being one of the larger platforms outside of the United States. So Heinz is focused primarily on building office buildings around the world. And it really, for most of its history, it's focused on excellence. It's built some of the most prominent, beautiful, high-functioning buildings around the world. Design, we've worked with, again, some of the most prominent architects around the world and helped some really interesting architects around the world come up and show their work. So in Toronto, we built CIBC Square, which is the new building with a diamond design. And our timber building, since I don't have any slides, is actually next door. So you'll see it hopefully some point today. And our focus has also really been throughout our history on sustainability. And a lot of companies have started to talk about sustainability really in the last decade. But Mr. Heinz, as a structural engineer, was focused on this really in the 60s and the 70s. He put a lot of time, money, effort into the U.S. Green Building Council, which was differently named back in the 70s. He was part of one of the founding leaders for LEED. And it's really just been an important focus pretty much since the inception of the company. Now, in the late 90s and the 2000s, we saw some companies, Hallmark, Allied, getting into brick and beam buildings. They were buying old manufacturing facilities and turning them into office buildings. And we saw the aesthetic appeal of those buildings. At the same time, we knew, we're one of the largest property managers in the world. We know that our tenants want a high-performing, comfortable, clean environment that has all the amenities that you might want in an office building, parking, loading. And a lot of the brick and beam buildings just didn't have that. My first job out of school, I worked at Cassette when it was at 500 King West. And if anyone wore high heels, you could hear it in the entire building. In one corner, it was sweltering. In the other corner, it was freezing. There was no loading. So, we used to bring our clients' product up. So you'd have people, schlepping boxes of cereal and McDonald's, you name it. And it wasn't a great office environment, even though it was absolutely stunning. So in 2013, we decided to look into mass timber, and we wanted to create, a building that had the look and feel of brick and beam, but really performed like, a world-class office building. And so we spent a few years in, what we call R&D, but kind of bashing our heads against the wall and spending a lot of money, figuring out how to build this kind of building. And in 2016, we delivered T3 North Loop, which is in Minneapolis. It's about a 200,000 square foot mass timber office building that became Amazon's headquarters in the Midwest. Then we rolled out another building in Atlanta, T3, I can't remember what it's called, T3 Atlanta. That became the headquarters for Facebook in the Southeast. And since then, we have 27 T3 buildings that are either completed in design or in construction around the world. The one next door, I don't know which direction it is, that way, you'll hopefully see it's just about to be completed. That's T3 Bayside. And then we have T3 Sterling Road, which is in the junction. There are 2 office buildings there. One is 6 stories, one is 8 stories, which will also be completed in a couple of weeks. And just because I think it'll come up, the building next door is 10 and a half stories, because I know we're going to talk about code and exciting things like that.
All right, so we have an interesting panel here. Eli, you're with a developer. You guys took the plunge early. You decided to go with timber, try it out, and help to make it happen with your partners. And interesting thing, you guys look at the cost of ownership, because most of your buildings, you own and operate them. And how does mass timber work for you in that equation?
What I think is interesting about how we operate, we're not a fund structure, so we have no closed-end requirements for selling assets at the end. So the benefit for us is that we're able to look at what the right solution is for the long-term, entire life cycle cost. So something like mass timber made a lot of sense for us because the reduction in upfront capital costs wasn't really a reduction; it was somewhat cost neutral when we did the project. But we felt a lot of conviction, similar to what Alex was saying, was that this is brick and beam 2.0. You get the comfort of a new building, but you have a lot of the aesthetic of what people want, which is this sort of warm feeling of natural elements. So when we look at total cost of ownership, we're not constrained to say, well, we're not going to get paid for making that investment. We expect to get paid for making that investment because we want to own the building from the time we build it until the time it reaches the end of its useful life. And hopefully we can repurpose it through adaptive reuse. I heard Craig speak earlier about this notion of being able to deconstruct buildings at the end. And that's something that I think is really interesting. Something why we really love to the aspect of adaptive reuse is that you're able to repurpose something that's old and make it new again. And I think that we're on the sort of verge of that with mass timber as well.
Alex, you guys, you have another 27 T3 projects in the pipeline, and you deliver these all around the world. You're a team of 150 people in Canada and 5,000 globally. So how is the delivery process for you with these T3? How much is the variation between each project? Is it like blueprint, cookie cutter, copy paste, or are there different floor layouts, and how do you navigate that?
I think that is a big part of the R&D, as we call it, and the brain damage that we spent doing T3 Minneapolis and T3 Atlanta, and now the 2 T3s in Toronto, has really helped us be able to deliver across the world. So Hines has a group, what we call the Conceptual Construction Group. And it's basically a centralized group of folks who learn, the lessons on the ground. And then one person from that centralized construction group is assigned to each project around the world. So in Canada, our team is Canadian. Every project is staffed by Canadians. I'm myself Canadian. But it is super helpful to have that one person assigned to your project who's built a building in Russia, who's built a building in Minneapolis, who's built a building in Sydney. I like to say that buildings, I think it's 97% of human DNA and dog DNA is the same, and it's only 3% difference or something. Buildings are kind of the same. An office building is an office building is an office building, and there are a few things that have to do with your environment, your municipal parameters, the ground structure and the temperature that are different, but generally those things are the same. And so that has really helped us roll out around the world. And some of the lessons we learned the hard way. In Atlanta, very different climate than Minneapolis and Toronto. There was a crazy rainstorm and some of the wood wasn't covered, and then it bleached and it also expanded. And so now in Toronto, the way we were building, we left certain gaps in between the building next door is CLT, the building in the junction is DLT. Just all these lessons learned, and having that centralized person allows us to, do it faster, better, cheaper every single time. To the question about whether or not we're building unique buildings each time or rolling out design, it really mix. It's a mix. So next door here, the building was designed by 3XN. That was, I know, Leith, you're talking about saying you shouldn't be building or designing a new building every time. That one is, more of a fresh design from the ground up, and it's a little bit different. architect wanted to do curtain wall, and that required different structural considerations on the inside. But generally, we try, our design in Atlanta really lends itself to being rolled out. And so that Atlanta design has been rolled out in T3 in the Junction and in a couple of places around the world, because why reinvent the wheel? Especially in an office building, a lot of the exterior is glass. And so let's keep it simple. Let's keep our costs down. Let's keep the speed up. And it just enables us to deliver faster.
Leith, I have here a note from our chat. Small is beautiful, and something to add there. I guess I didn't introduce myself here. So I'm with Rotoblast USA now, but over the last 8 years working with Rotoblast, I've done business development in various countries, Switzerland, UK. At some point, I was responsible for China and also the eastern part of Canada, focusing on the US now for the last, since 2019, so 4 years coming up. And one thing that a lot of people are surprised to hear is that mass timber really started as a construction material for small buildings in Europe. So Europe is really a follower in big buildings, in tall buildings. The English-speaking world, the UK, Australia, Canada, and the US are leading the charge here. And now Europe is following. When will North America follow with small buildings?
Yeah.
Just pull out your crystal ball.
Yeah, soon. So this is the conundrum. When I talk about repeatability and not doing a one-off, it's to address small. It's different horses for different courses. You're doing big projects. You got the budgets can accommodate more unique design. But you're right. You're going to keep the DNA that works and then focus on the changes and keep evolving. But on a little project, you've got to kind of nail it. It's just, there's no room. Toronto Hydro. So the answer is, we know how to do it in terms of building, and it is this sort of repeatability and get into sites and do parametric adaptation rather than new design. Municipalities are trying to accommodate small. Policies always want them. We still have tremendous barriers. Like if you need to bring in power, you don't have a problem. You're going to build a vault room and go crazy. I don't have room for a vault room. And Toronto Hydro is a place that has a policy that, well, if you have more than 2 people with a cooktop, we need a vault or a transformer. So I've now built 6 projects without it, but every time I have to go and argue for it. And it takes months. And so the enemy of small, if we want to make it work, is getting your arms around every kind of barrier, not just the things that I'm addressing. And the head pounding exercise of getting through it. And there's a reason why I'm a lonely participant in an all-wood small building. It's really, really hard. Now, it's coming. And I think that with some building code changes on one stair and things that are, Ontario will bring it in on the next code change. But that is when? 3 years from now? 4 years? 5 years? So
Where's that crystal ball?
yeah, we're just now implementing the one that was supposed to have been done 4 years ago. So I think that it's coming, but it's can't tell you when. 2027.
All right.
You heard it here first. 2027.
Massive mid-rise, busy middle.
I guess, there's a lot of friction still in the system on all levels. And also, Craig also touched on it. I think mass timber is we're here at the mass timber seminar, but it is a component, it's a building material that needs to find its way into the right places so that it can be leveraged by the design community. I want to bounce this around among all of us, all of you guys. What about Craig's statement, mass timber is not a religion? What's your thoughts on this? Hybridization?
I'll jump in. I think mass timber has a part to play in the infrastructure that we build. I personally don't believe it is a one size fits all. I think that there are some projects that lend itself very well, smaller, repeatable, simple structures. I think when you get into articulation or setbacks or cantilevers, it becomes very complicated. And this notion of, when I think of mass timber, I think that the draw of it is speed, efficiency, repeatability. So when you start adding in these unique elements, you start to lose that. And in addition, then you need to introduce other building materials, structural steel, concrete. We had an active discussion before about concrete toppings on top of floor panels. So I don't believe, I support Craig's statement. I don't believe it's the only solution. I think we need to be open to it's a tool in the toolkit that we can use for the right application.
I'd add to that also and say height. And it's not just because of the obvious, the building code, because building code is changing. There's a building in Vancouver, which I think is 42 stories of mass timber structure. But it's not just about creating a structure, it's also the aesthetic appeal, right? There's so many benefits to health and to the actually seeing the wood, touching the wood, smelling the wood, that if you're covering it all up in drywall because that's what you need to do for the height, you're like, of course the environmental element is there, but it does cost more and you are losing that aesthetic element to it. So I agree with you. I don't think it's a one-stop shop. And I do think that height, in addition to all the things you talked about, is a limiting factor. And that's not such a bad thing. It's okay.
The good news is, we're not talking anymore so much about is it good for the world? Sure. Less concrete, obviously good. I'm working with some guys out of Denmark to try and build a wood slab for the grade to get rid of all the concrete. But that will come soon. And we have a very carbon neutral building with only a slab on grade. But one of my guys came to me yesterday. Maybe he knows me too well. I said, don't be mad, but I have to tell you something. All right. And so, the building we're doing for it's an indigenous group, and it's not very wide. So it's got a lot of void, it's got a lot of structural issues. And we were playing around with my favorite, just do everything on a CLT. And we're going to have to put some steel in it, and then we have to put the intermescent paint on it. And then, we should just do a concrete core for the elevator. That'll hold everything up. And it's like, I don't want to do that. I just told everybody I'm all wood. And what we realized, and after we did the math, we're actually using less concrete because we're thinning the slab and the footings and taking that out and doing the elevator core, but we actually are putting in less concrete overall. So now I'm like, okay, you can do it. But so we're still learning, and being open to how you design wood building is important, and absolutely as consistent as I can be. You still have soil conditions, you still have somebody puts a program in, we've got a floor with a lot of office and then a whole lot of small nonprofit units on top of it. Wood is not for everything. So you do have to be, that's why I said, if I can do your program, I'm with you. But if I can't, I'll tell you and go do something else.
And I'd add to that too, because you were talking about the friction in the industry. Bringing your team on early is really important because, you've got so many intelligent, creative, hardworking, resourceful people. If, especially as developers, if we think that we know everything and we bring everyone to the table later, just, having these conversations later when you've already spent the money doing all these drawings, or maybe you're already under construction, it just takes more time, costs more money, and creates a barrier to doing timber projects. So without a doubt, having your structural engineer at the table from day one is necessary, and your timber fabricator. Like, you really need those groups. I think the engineers and the architects in the building as well, having those people early, and as people are becoming more familiar, it just makes the process so much smoother. A lot of those issues can come up earlier. You get more creative minds. The TRCA building, Toronto Regional Conservation Authority, which is an absolutely gorgeous building, but they'll admit themselves, they designed the building structurally, said they were going to do it in timber, but hadn't brought a timber fabricator on board until after, and had to basically redesign the entire building. So bring your team on early. And
Further to that, I think one thing that gets overlooked is that the level of design that needs to be done in a timber building is far beyond what your typical, I'll pick on mechanical and electrical engineers, but what they think about. So every penetration for conduit or for sprinkler lines, that needs to be pre-designed.
yes.
You can't just core a hole through, a glulam beam. It's not the same solution. So it really it's incredibly important to have those roots on early and make sure that they're thinking through complete design from a much earlier stage than they would in a typical building.
100%.
And Eli, I think you also mentioned you have to challenge existing boundaries, push the envelope. Like on your 80 Atlantic job, you guys did some testing to actually quantify the performance of the panels to approximate it better.
Sure. Yeah. So when we started our structural sort of detailed design, shop drawing design for the mass timber elements, and the engineer came back and said, we're going to have to add in a bunch of steel, and we're talking $1 million of structural steel. We're looking at it. We're looking around the table going, well, we were building a wood building. Why are we putting steel in? They're saying, well, the performance of the NLT panels is not going to support the structural load. So we kind of banged this around for a while, and the solution that we came up with was, well, let's build a panel and let's live load test it. And keep in mind, we're in construction, so we have structure happening as we're trying to figure this out. So we live load tested. We built a full size panel. We live load tested it. It performed 20% better than what the calculations were. So that allowed us to reduce that $1 million extra to about 150 grand. So big win. Really cool story about sort of the iteration of design, and I think. But what was really interesting was that there's no data on this stuff, and things that, keeping in mind, this project was started 6 years ago, 7 years ago. So there's been a lot of improvement made in this space, but the lack of tangible, actionable data really put the engineers in a tough spot, and architects, to say, well, we need to default to extra conservatism. So having to push those norms was a regular part of how we were able to get through that project. And I think the one thing that we need to continue to do is continue to evaluate those first principle ideas and confirm that they actually work for a timber building. We just tend to default to what we know, and that was, in this instance, was going to put us in a really difficult position.
Alex, you mentioned the exposure of the timber and the encapsulation. What is you guys' approach? And I want to add one thing that I was surprised about, because most of my experience is outside of Europe. Actually, most of the structures in Europe are being covered up with drywall or with other panel products. So the mass timber is viewed as an efficient, sustainable, prefabricated structural material. It's not there for its beauty.
Can it be both?
It can be both,
It can be both. I mean, encapsulation is probably not the sexiest topic, but we do think a lot about it and really try to limit the encapsulation as much as possible for a variety of reasons. I'm a developer, so I'll just say it, but we have found in our timber buildings, our structural costs are about 10 to 15% higher. It's still worth it to us, and part of that is, number one, it goes up faster, so you save time in your schedule. And number two, we find, tenants are willing to pay a tiny bit more for that timber that you can see, and that makes it all worth it. And so for us, it's a win-win. So next door, which is a 10.5-story building, because you're above code, you would be required to cover up quite a bit of that timber in drywall. Same with our 8-story building in the Junction, but we don't want to cover it up. Part of the timber, yes, it is a structural material, but part of it is the beauty and the health benefits as well. And so we're actually really lucky, for those planners in the audience. I don't know if you work for the city or not, but the city of Toronto and the city of Vancouver have great departments where you can work on what's called an alternative solution and get your municipality involved early as well. And you can really bring kind of what Eli's talking about here. If we just do what we know, we go to the highest level of conservatism, you're gonna be required to cover up as much of that drywall as wood as possible as soon as you go outside of code. But if you engage your municipality early, a lot of them have departments that are willing to work with you. You do your own testing to prove it out, and it's just absolutely worth it. I mean, I am so deep in the Kool-Aid, but when I first walked into our T3 building in Minneapolis, and I'd been working on T3 for a couple of years already. And I'm not even joking you can smell the wood. And you don't think about it, but in your home, whatever colors you've painted your walls, it's not white and gray. You walk into an office building, and we build loads of them, and they are beautiful, and I love them, but they're white. And they're gray, and they're very stark. You walk into an office building, you walk into an 80 Atlantic that has wood walls, a wood ceiling, it's warm and it's bright, and you want to work there and you want to stay there. So I hear what you're saying, Hannes. It can be just a structural material, and it's absolutely worth it. It's sustainable. But I think if you have the ability to expose that wood as much as possible, it's just, I don't know, you're kind of robbing the experience to not do that.
There's a really interesting set of circumstances when you're building out of wood. The tradesmen. Because it's warm.
But they can't drink coffee. They can't spill the coffee.
They can't spill coffee.
They can't spill coffee.
Cigarettes.
They can't smoke
But,
cigarettes.
and like the elevator guys we used to, we built our towers out of CLT. They're the straightest ones we've ever been in. And the elevator job, if you have kids who want to get into a good career, go into elevators. Because they just sort of sit in a slate in those things for hours and days on end. That's why it takes so long to repair things. And the wood ones are more appealing. They're just going to camp out in there. My first NLT building was Broadview Loss. It was a conversion of a 6 and 4-story brick and beam building in just over here. And I fell in love with the wood then. And what I know from people is they love the wood because they paid. We didn't charge enough, but people I own 2 of them, and I made more money than the company when we developed it, because the logarithmic on hard loss. But the NLT is a noise nightmare, and you can't fix it on an old building. We spent an inordinate time trying to put floor pucks, but at the end of the day, an old NLT, in new NLT, there's gap. And it just bounces, and it goes over the beam into the next place. So, thankfully, conversions weren't tearing them. So, sorry, we told you it could be noisy, it's an old building. And you can fix it, drywall your ceiling, and it fixes it. Nobody did that because they love the wood. We'll live with the noise. We love the wood.
Yeah, an interesting notion or an interesting question someone asked me just recently was, I travel a lot and I meet a lot of people. I think I have 4,000 business cards at home. Someone asked me, did you ever meet someone who said he was done with it? And I travel a lot. I see the good, I see the bad, I see the ugly, and there's a learning curve. Not always everything goes perfectly, but I have to say I have never met anyone who came out of the process and said, "That's it. I'm not doing this anymore. I don't see the value." They come out, they say, "Okay, listen, we screwed up, but we learned something. We knew we did something wrong or what went wrong." And some say they don't know when their next project will be, but nobody says, "I'm done with this." And
I like that.
And with that, I want to check if there's a few questions. We have a couple of minutes left just for 2 questions. Okay, three, that's it. Is there microphones out there?
We'll start with you in the middle here.
Thanks. So first off, you were talking about taking on the capital cost of conducting the testing and to develop the data that the industry is lacking. And I think kind of that approach from certainly all 3 of you over the last at least 5 to 7 years that mass timber has been growing in Canada has been so important for people like us working on those mass timber buildings to work with somebody who's willing to invest in that testing and allow us to remove conservatisms that maybe we put on the first project that we don't have to put on the second project. So that is just really refreshing to hear. My question is specifically for you, Alex, as an international developer with doing a lot of work in Europe. I'm curious if you were able to leverage your European connections who maybe got into mass timber sooner to kind of garner the data that they've drawn from their earlier mass timber projects and apply that to your North American mass timber developments.
That is such a great question to which I wish I had the answer. I do not. I don't. I'm so sorry, but I am going to look it up.
Innovation is really expensive
In the short term.
in the short term.
But your point is, I get your point, and something that Heinz really, and every company for sure, but I think just because of Heinz's expansion, we spent a lot of time not reinventing the wheel, right? If you experience that problem in Poland, you're gonna experience it in Atlanta, and trying to really share that knowledge. So I'm gonna find out. It's a great question. Thank you.
So Leith mentioned CCDC, a contractual arrangement. I wanted to hear from, what's your perspective? What do you want to see from design builders or the industry in general as developers to make it easy for you to do more mass timber buildings at scale? What kind of business models and contractual arrangements would be most attractive to you to really do more of these projects easier?
For us, it's not the contractual concerns that we have. Honestly, for us, it's height, availability of land. It's really more that. Maybe I'm being overly positive, but the trades in the markets that we've worked in, especially in Toronto, have just been so awesome. Everyone's so excited about timber. That's, at least in our experience, that's not where the friction is happening.
There's a big difference between res and commercial, and so res is complicated. It's not that commercial isn't simple, but it's less complicated. And so, and the smaller your project, the more you need an aligned group. There's no time for an argument or somebody kicking out the, I didn't like what you did. There's a conflict between the drywaller and the ductwork guy, and one guy snips his ducts, the other guy pounds holes in the drywall. And it happens all the time when they get into a fight. So you can't afford it. So the contractual arrangement is important. Is more important the smaller your build is. The thing that we really need is an industrialization strategy in Ontario. Get behind the code changes, get behind the design community, getting behind using it. It used to be just decoration. Now it's core to projects, and everybody's understanding the wellness and the sustainability. But we need more of it. Element 5 will, if we do this right, they'll be the first one to say, let's fill our plant twice over, but we'll need more. And I'm trying to invest in dimensional panel plants and its logistics solutions and getting cladding put on. So there's a whole strategy around the industrialization of it. There's a big role for federal and provincial governments to lead in on it. We should become experts at it. We have a lot of wood. So we should be the best people in the world to do it. And Sweden's doing a wonderful job with it, and Austria's way ahead. But there's no reason we shouldn't be doing similar.
Agreed. I mean, to that point, until Element 5's St. Thomas facility was up and running, for our projects here in Canada, we were actually importing our wood from Europe because it was, which is crazy. But now that will hopefully change.
Yeah, I'll echo what Leith had said, is that I think that mass timber has a big part to play in drawing from manufacturing principles. So lean delivery, Six Sigma type approach, limiting that time of production to installation, modular construction. I think it all is part and parcel, and it's all part of a collective solution.
All right, we're out of time here. Has been fun. Thanks for being up here. If you guys still have some questions, meet them at the coffee break, at the lunch break later on. And thanks, guys.